Welcome to Hortculture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture.
Greetings, podcast fam.
Hello.
What's going on in your all's neck of the
Another
woods?
beautiful day in the neighborhood.
It is a beautiful day, actually, outside.
I went outside in between episode recordings and I was like, ooh, it is a very nice day out. It's warm, a little bit of sunshine. The buds are budding and doing buddy things. And yeah.
I was at an extension meeting earlier today, giving a little talk, and it's one of those swings in temperature, and the building hadn't really caught up yet. And it was so humid in the room that I was like, I felt like I was in a greenhouse. So I had to put on a sweatband and everything else.
The bigger buildings struggle. I mean, especially, and here lately, we've said it time and again on the podcast, these 50-degree shifts. I mean, these big commercial systems, 40, 50-degree shifts just don't keep up. By the time they switch over, then the temperature's done something different. So Kentucky is just saying, nope, you can't keep up with me. This is a race you're not going to win, at least in the transition season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's tough.
Well, I got a question. So that the warm, sunny days inspire all of us to get outside and hopefully not plant things before the last frost date if they're frost sensitive and all of those things. Don't get ahead of yourself. But I wanted to see, are you all trying anything new in your gardens this year?
Yeah. We are.
Always, huh, Jessica?
Yeah.
You guys always have fun projects going on. And
we have our big commercial production garden, but the kids and I are now going to have a small little garden in our backyard that's just going to have a variety of random things that we don't grow on a bigger scale for a farmer's market, and more things of just for the kids to play with, basically, start them young, things they enjoy. So they'll enjoy gardening, right? So it's not like oh my gosh, the garden, right? So things that they like. So we're doing some onions because my children love onions. They eat raw onions all the time. So, we're planting some onions.
Just don't get a hold of the spicy onion. Some onions, not all onions are the same. They like the
yeah. They'll be like, hot. I need a drink of water, and then they run and chug some water. So.
Raw onion with a honey chaser.
Oh. Yeah. Maybe I should introduce them to that.
It was in combination before. It seems like I've seen ingredients that combine the two. Definitely garlic and honey.
Yeah,
I've seen before. Yeah, garlic and honey is more common, but I've seen it tried with onions, but not as commonly as garlic.
I've seen garlic and onion before.
Yeah, garlic and onion. Yeah, I'm honey and all the things, not the garlic. Garlic and onion is quite good together, though. My son has figured out if you caramelize those things, especially the onion, a sweet onion becomes even sweeter. He's like, Dad, can you just caramelize up a skillet of onions? I'm like, do what? Yeah, he asked me that yesterday, and I was like, I'm impressed you use the word caramelize.
Lots of butter.
Yeah, it's the butter and the magic of caramelization, that bringing that sugar out. A good onion's hard to beat. That's a crop, newer crop for me that I've not done in many years would be a potato onion. It's one that is an heirloom onion. I'm really surprised that I don't see more, and it's one that we grew as I was growing up. And the real benefit of that onion is that the bulbs are dividing. It's a perennial onion. One bulb becomes 4 or 5. They're not huge. They're sort of elongate. They're not a real round traditional onion, but it's a little bit different in that it's planted like garlic. You plant it in September or October. It grows through the winter really, really closely to garlic, and then you harvest it June, July in Kentucky, and then you just save the biggest bulbs and replant those and keep 3/4 of the bulbs, and then use those. But it's a really interesting onion in that once you have it, you have it. And they're really winter hardy. They have, they're being an onion. They don't have a lot of pest problems for the most part, but there were families that had potato onions for 30 plus years, kind of like asparagus patches. Once you had them and you knew how to manage them. But I would love to try those again. I've just seen no local sources for those where I'm at in central Kentucky, but I was encouraged to find online that you could easily find potato onions. That, and there's another, the onion that falls under the perennial onion family, and that's the Egyptian walking onions. And they actually fall over and seed. They're kind of cool too, but we never grew those on our place. But I would like to get into potato onions again.
Well, Ray, that beautiful soliloquy on onions answered the question for me: what would happen if a hobbit became an extension agent?
There you go.
Because that was very
Potatoes.
Samwise Gamgee's, like
Yeah.
talking about the different types of potatoes and the different, beautiful.
Yeah.
I never heard of potato onions, so that's new to me.
Yeah,
That's
they're
cool.
really cool. And I think they were popular because they're almost, well, they're an heirloom, considered an heirloom, but you didn't have to keep buying seed stock. And that's why
Mhm.
my grandmother said they were so popular, is that you never had to go to the store to buy any more.
Yeah.
They always
sense.
made more of themselves. They're a dividing perennial. So very cool type of onion. Look it up.
That's really cool.
Yeah. What about you, Brett?
I'm not doing anything crazy new. I mean, the bonsai stuff kind of becomes new every year. You do things differently and move it. I've moved a bunch of things to smaller pots. I'm trying to start some pitch pine seeds.
Mm-hmm. Special process there, I'm assuming, to start pitch pine seeds.
Not crazy.
No burning involved or anything.
No burning.
No oven.
A little bit of they've been kind of passive, just cold stratified for a while, and then I drop them in some water and soak them right before seeding. But other than that, not like some of the other crazy things where I had like a 60-day cold or 60-day warm strat, 60-day cold strat.
Wow.
Blah, blah, blah. And those are cool too, but these are supposed to be much more simple to get to pop up. But we're not starting our own. We do annual plugs so we can put them exactly where we want them to go, rather than just seeding them out. Some of our flowers, we're having a flower grower that we all happen to know grow some of those out for us and buying them from her rather than trying that ourselves. So we're going to do that. But a lot of it's the cool thing with the mostly perennial backyard is that each year you just see this development of the theme rather than a new thing every year. So that's cool.
Something I love about the perennials for that reason is that they either come back or, that they're there. There's a certain element of permanence to it that I've always enjoyed with.
I'm excited to look for. I planted a couple things last fall or the end of the summer, found like a cool native grower locally. And so I purchased a couple of things, and I've been going around checking the spots that I could remember. I already had some things pop up that I was like, I don't remember putting something there, but I guess it did. Right.
There.
So like, even though I realized like so far my early spring goal is a lot of like vegetable and fruit, like just small things, just for, enough to play with at the house for the kids mostly. I am definitely excited about like what you said of seeing the perennial beds that I've started to install. How, last year they may have been like a single little stick, like a phlox with just like one little stalk of one little flower, and how it'll be this year. I have some baptisia that is starting to come up that I'm very excited for when that comes up and blooms this year. So
yeah, it's like it almost is like reading a novel compared to reading a poem or a short story. You get these different chapters of the same book across time, and it's really nice. So it's been cool. But as we talk about this gardening stuff, this might get a little contentious here. So strap in. So one of the things I've told the story on the podcast before. There's an episode where Annie and I talk about the evolution of our backyard garden space. One of the things when we had our whole backyard in essentially a very ultra small scale commercial horticulture operation, as far as the technology that was there, we weren't selling anything, but we were putting it out there. People would come and ask us, they'd look at that and they'd say, "Oh my gosh, do you all grow all the food you eat here in the backyard?" And I would sort of, not mean spiritedly, but I would sort of laugh and say, "Oh no, no, we do not. We grow a lot of produce. We will grow all the tomatoes that we will eat in the course of a year. And that includes canning, we'll grow all the butternut squash that we'll eat in a year. But this Adonis body was not built on tomatoes and butternut squash alone, my friends." And so I was always a little skeptical of that. And so I went digging on the internet, as I am wont to do. and came across, there's this kind of, I'm not going to shout anything out specifically about it, but there's a particular story that is circulated on Facebook and Reddit and other places a million times over, and it's this group, or this family, I guess, that claims that they are able to grow all of the dietary needs of a family of 4 on a 1/10 acre plot. And I think the claims, they may not be claiming it themselves, but there's definitely, that claim is then made on their behalf in, the Facebook comments that are like, why doesn't everybody just do this? Because the world would be a better place if we grew all of our food. And so it got me thinking about this idea of like, not necessarily how much food can you grow on a 1 acre or, a 1/10 of acre plot. And just for reference, a lot of suburban plots are about a 1/4 acre. You've got your house, you've got probably some other driveway or something else that's taking up some space. And so a 1/10 of an acre is a reasonable amount that you could have under cultivation in those spaces. And so I just sort of thinking like, what do we think about this idea? Why is it so popular or so like compelling for people? And what are some of the things that maybe we don't have to tear the narrative apart, but what are some things, some issues that we see with the idea of just grow all your own food in your backyard and you won't have to buy any food? I'm just curious. Have you all seen these types of posts and things before at all?
Yeah, and I think that, and I love reading about those stories, and I love people's passion that goes into those stories because they tend to be avid, passionate gardeners. But one of the first things I start to look for is, well, what zone makes that possible? And a lot of times I find that.
What do you mean zone?
Is it a climate that they can grow year round?
Like a USDA zone?
Yeah, USDA zone. We're here in Kentucky. We tend to have there's 6 and 7 a transition zone, so we get not the best of anything for the most part, except for a short period of time. Our zones are not conducive for growing year round unless you have protected, structures, protected growing conditions. Some parts of the country, they have a much longer growing season, or they have a growing season that's pretty much almost year round for common garden crops. If you're very far south or in areas like that. But that's the first thing I look for, because I question, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. But, how are they doing that? And are they using structures? Are they using, vertical systems or what allows for that? Because one person, we were just kind of chatting before the podcast, it can take a lot of square feet for people to grow a pretty good amount of the food that they're going to eat. Now, when people say they grow all of the food that they need, it comes out of their garden. That can mean a lot of different things. And I've heard people make the comment when I really talk to them, they're like, oh, but that doesn't include like the meat, or doesn't include the peanut butter if you're in Kentucky, or some of the other common protein sources. So it's really just a matter of, first of all, I love the passion, but then I start to drill down and say, what are we really talking about here? Just to kind of see.
I can't think of the word that I'm looking for right now, but like when you look at your plate at dinner, right? I think it's the, like the dream, or like you hope, like you look down and you're like, wow, everything that I'm feeding my family right now, I grew, right? And I feel like that kind of drives it. And I know I've had that personally myself, of like during the summer, right? Definitely not during the winter or fall or even early spring, but during the like middle of the summer, I've had those moments where I'm like, wow, almost everything on this plate, we've grown ourselves. With some help, with some other like additives, right? Because if I make rolls or whatever to go with it, I'm not making my own flour. I'm buying flour, but I made them myself, right? I'm not churning the butter, but like the meat that's there, the veggies that are on that plate, if we could provide them that nostalgia, I don't know exactly what word I'm looking for, to see that and be like, wow, I could actually provide stuff. I think that's what drives a lot of people. And they see that online too. They see like where people post about like, oh, we harvested all this from our garden.
Sure.
And that encourages people to that, they want to do that. And I feel like that fuels a lot of it as well. Just being able to feed your family.
That's a super gratifying feeling.
Yeah.
But just to be clear real quick, you are not producing all of that food on 1/10 of an acre. Is that right?
Right. I mean, I'm also considering the pork and beef that's on my plate as well, and I definitely don't have a cow or a pig on a 1/10 of an acre.
Sure.
So,
And so that's an example where
yeah.
you are providing a lot of your own food, as you know, in tandem with a commercial operation that's selling some portion of that food as well. But I think that is amazing, and it's like captivating, and it's the idea of a meal that everything is there,
Yeah.
something you grew is really, really cool. To maybe make a kale quiche or frittata or something with kale and onions that you grew in the spring with some eggs from your layers that'll back around. And I mean, and maybe some dried tomatoes that you have from last year or canned tomatoes or something like that. Like that is really, really cool. And that's what I'm saying. I don't want the tone of the episode to be, oh, these people saying that they can grow everything, blah, blah, blah. But there is and I'll just put a little bit finer point on it. I think I hope, and maybe I'm just projecting, but I hope that people seeing that don't think, well, if I can't do that, I shouldn't do anything. Or if I can't do something close to that, doing the little piddly whatever is not worthwhile. I mean, why not? I'll just buy everything because a couple of tomato plants and a couple of pepper plants is just silly or something like that. And again, I don't know that people feel that way, but it can be kind of intimidating.
I think it's like for us as a family, it's a progression through the season, and kind of already mentioned like the zones or season of what you can grow, right? So like early in the spring, our system that we have, we don't really grow cole crops or lettuces or anything like that, but we love to eat those and enjoy those. So we buy them from other farmers or at farmers markets or things like that. But then as the summer goes on, I can start to see where, okay, we're growing our own sweet corn and we're growing our own tomato, and it kind of supplements out until, going, following through the season again. But I don't think you have to if you can do the whole thing, that's amazing and awesome. But as long as you're doing some of it, that's still pretty cool, right? To be able to be enjoying like maybe half your plate or even a quarter of your plate, have something on there that you've grown yourself.
Yeah, it can definitely get skewed a little bit. And, I encourage people, and I've had conversations with people. They're like, "Oh, well, I'm not a really advanced gardener like so and so that I saw online." And then we get to talking to somebody from Southern California, which is amazing. But that's why I try to stress geography and not looking. It's great to get online or look at social media, and I do that myself. But it's great to get on there and get ideas and get motivated. But don't, be real careful not to benchmark yourself against other people. Number one, they're not living where you live, and they don't have the same soil resources. You may or may not have the same soil resources, but not only that, but your family's different and your tastes are different. Let's say I love corn, and corn is kind of, if you're really constricted on space, it poses a problem. But that person may love tomatoes, and their 4 tomato plants are hugely productive in 1/10 of the space. So, I mean, it's not just about what you can grow, but it's about what you want to kind of preserve and eat fresh and all these other things. And I like your comment, Brett, is I guess the theme of this episode is, don't do too much comparison, because every situation is really different. That's why when people come into my office and we're talking about local food production, their personal food production, I love to talk with people. I mean, some people have a high tunnel and they can really increase, 2 or 3 weeks on the front and back end of their season and grow so much more for their families if it's for personal consumption. But everybody's situation is so different. It's hard to compare. Yeah, you can produce it, but what if your family doesn't like kale and you've produced 1/8 of an acre of kale? I mean, there's so much goes into it.
Example that I probably said on here, I know I say it in all of my like gardening 101 classes. I always talk about like planting what your family likes. Try something new every year, right? Try something new. Because you never know, try what you might start liking. But my example I always give is ghost pepper plants. One plant produces 75 peppers. So speaking from experience,
they go a long way too. They go a real long way.
Speaking from experience, you probably don't need 25 to 30 ghost pepper plants.
But they're easy to grow, Jessica. They're easy, and you can have great success with them.
And nothing wants to eat them because it almost kills them to eat it.
Yeah. Same thing as cayenne peppers. So lesson learned, we only grow like 5 now. Yeah. And that's plenty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a similar scenario in that I love fresh tomatoes, and I made an assumption a long time ago when my wife and I, we first, purchased our first home. I was like, well, she loves salsa and things, but little did I know she does not like fresh tomatoes. And I grew like 8 tomato plants for 2 people. I should have grew one half a tomato plant, it sounds like. But I love to grow tomatoes, but it's now I don't grow it just for our family because neither my son or wife, they like to eat fresh tomatoes, and we don't can a lot now. It's just not part of our workflow and at home. But I give away to neighbors. They're highly productive. I do it because I enjoy it with the knowledge of knowing I'm going to overproduce. If I grow 4 plants, that's probably too much of the
Mm-hmm.
variety that I grow. But I have people and food banks that I can give it to, so it does not go to waste because I grow it because I enjoy it. It's a different kind of way to measure success there. And stuff like that comes into play. But yeah, they don't eat fresh tomatoes, but I still enjoy watching them grow.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're touching on, Ray, a little bit is the values behind whatever you're doing. And when I see things like that sort of talk about the scale of whatever that the people are doing, the first thing that comes to mind is like the Instagram flex or the Facebook flex or the Reddit flex or whatever it is, where you're just sort of trying to demonstrate how awesome you are or how whatever you are. The other thing that's interesting is you'll often see this like curious set of metrics that are included with how much they grew. And it's something that people have a hard time wrapping their head around. So like, it'll be like, we grew 5,000 pounds of food on this space. And that is cool. It's impressive. That's whatever. It sounds like something that someone would include in a grant proposal or report or something, or like a report to, if I say, if I'm working on a project and I'm having to go to report to legislators about the impact of the project, they don't want to hear a 10-minute story about how the community member felt fulfilled in growing that stuff that was supported. They want to hear $5,000 went in their pocket instead. And it's this weird metrification of this process. But that aside, which is more than most people want to probably get into, even 5,000 pounds of produce, that's a weird metric. It's kind of hard to.
It lives in a vacuum.
It's useful for comparing year to year, and I think like food banks and other people use this as a metric to show how the impact that they're making. Hundreds of thousands of pounds and all that kind of stuff, and that's great. I'm not trying to rain on that parade, but 10 pounds of watermelon and 10 pounds of green beans and 10 pounds of beets that have the greens stripped off are 3 very, very different things.
Yeah.
And so if you cut the rind off, there's a lot of water in there that is, if you're really, really thirsty and you need a snack in the summertime, watermelon is amazing. If you haven't eaten all day and you have a dinner of watermelon, you're going to be having second dinner, throwing back to the Hobbit paradigm reference. But so I think that's it's just an interesting metric. And I found myself falling into this with our garden. And that's kind of when we transitioned it over to perennials, was like, am I just doing this for like clout? Am I doing this so that people think that I'm
You feel like
cool?
you're in the business, so you should kind of thing, Brett? Or
a little bit of that,
yeah.
but more, it was more just like expectations.
Yeah.
This idea of like the personal brand that I'm not capitalizing on
your
it.
vibe.
But yeah. Oh, you are the one that have the crazy garden that does this thing. And I was like, man, I'm like getting into my ego here. And this is really, really weird. So I think that the yield concept in general can kind of be misleading, especially if we're talking about produce. But there's other things too that have like, I could probably eat 10 pounds of produce in a day and not come close to my caloric needs or my protein needs.
I know you could eat 10 pounds of peaches a day. We've well established that.
And have would again.
And would recommend 100%. Huh? But yeah, the metric stuff is it is very interesting. It's not straightforward, is it? Not really.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And again, if you're trying to demonstrate like we're feeding hungry people and this is how much food we put in there, like I'm not trying to rain on that parade, but if it's just sort of a flex, it can sound like I don't even have a reference point for 6,000 pounds of food. I don't, because I'm thinking like, well, I mean, I couldn't eat more than a pound of food at a given meal. And so that means, 6,000 pounds would be enough for me to have, but it's not necessarily exactly that. Jessica, you brought up the nature of the things that are being produced. So you have some meat, or maybe somebody has some legumes, or they have grains, all those things that are, frankly, you just kind of have to have some space.
Yeah. Yeah. And it depends. Like, I know I keep going back to like what your family likes. If you're going to feed, like, how much variety are you going to have in that garden, really, on that smallest space? Are you going to have, to produce the amount you need, right? When you think about it that way, like, are you going to be better off planting like 3 main crops in that garden that you're going to produce a lot of from those to be able to feed, but you also want that variety, but they all might not produce them out. We've already kind of all touched on this. So a lot more goes into it. Versus, I can't remember what you said, what you called it, Brett, about like just the Instagram and Facebook wow factor. Like you see these pristine gardens. That's the other thing, pristine gardens, a real garden, if you can make them look beautiful, but there's challenges with them as well that you hit, along the road that can play into, what you get to feed your family for that full year. As I have just freshly tilled up that spot in my backyard, and my kids were planting onions and they want to plant potatoes, and in the back of my mind, I'm like gung ho, yes, I want to do this and build this memory with my children. But then in the back of my mind, the horticulture entomologist in me is like, oh, there's going to be a lot of wireworms there because that's
turned over.
That's freshly tilled. So I was like, so we'll see what we get. Right? They're just excited to play in the soil and plant, But I think that's a lot of it too. Is just like there's a lot of just like the wow factor that you see online, and like what you can really put in there and get out of it.
There's a certain factor in the United States, that we have a pretty amazing food system, and I'm amazed at how good it is. Transportation's pretty good. That we have this luxury of, stepping back and doing garden math. You're like, is it worth it to grow the potatoes because I can get them fairly affordably? Good quality, good affordability. For the most part, in comparison to some other things. But, that's kind of a luxury. And not only that, but I've always thought our access to seeds, I mean, a pack of seeds holds such tremendous potential. If you get a pack of tomato seeds and you want to throw that out and grow your own little group of transplants, it's fairly straightforward to do. May not be your jam. You may want to do that. But, I mean, we have access to all of these tools and products to help us grow. And I've seen folks be so successful that we started having a conversation before we started the podcast, that they were so successful that they were not interested in canning. They just produced too much. Then they didn't have anybody to give it to. And they were like, okay, this has just been so much work for what? But that's on the complete flip side of the conversation. But they were very successful, small family. And I've seen it multiple times, and they're like, what do I do with these 2,000 pounds of tomatoes in this case? And, there might not have been a food bank to take that to close enough. And all of their all of their neighbors, when one person has tomatoes, usually everybody starts having tomatoes. If there's a bunch of home gardeners in the area, at a point you can't even give them away. That's when I get frustrated. If I'm growing something, I can't consume it fresh, which is my preferred way. If I have an abundance of it, the next year I guarantee I'm not going to grow as much of that. I'm like, why did I do that? I always kind of feel this wasteful aspect, and I'm very sensitive to that. I don't want to be wasteful of my time that I spent, my fertilizer, the water that went into that, the effort. So that's something that, and it sounds counterintuitive, but watch out for the success. I mean, be realistic.
There's only so many zucchinis, right?
Gosh,
or so many squash
Yeah.
If it's the right time of season and, they're thriving,
Oh,
you
and they
pick
will all
them,
come
and
at
then
the
you
very
come
same
back
time.
the
Yeah.
next day and you're like, "What the heck? There's 20 more."
How did I
Like,
miss those
where did they
30?
come from?
Well, I tell you what, the squash vine borers will fix that for you. They're
Yeah,
my
as the season
nemesis. Yeah,
as the
Brett and I were
season
talking
goes
about that.
on, you think you're good at growing them, they'll be like, "Ha, think again."
Yeah. And when I first came into extension, I was so excited about succession planting and convincing home gardeners, to have a 3-season crop. But I learned over time that is not a lot of people's realistic goals, because they're like, wait a minute, buddy. We're going to do the spring garden, we're going to harvest, but in between there, we're going to have vacations and baseball practices and all of this other stuff. And it's almost like the vast majority of home gardeners I've ever worked with are, Brett talked about maximizing production on small spaces. That's in the minority. That is not a lot of people's goals that I've worked with. When I tell them, hey, you've got 2 more seasons here, do succession plantings and, do a fall, summer, and, planting and all the things. And they're like, no, we kind of want to keep this simple. That's how
Right.
we've been in it for 30 years.
I'm
We want to
always
keep it simple.
very impressed, even with, market-sized gardens, right?
Mhm.
When they have the succession plantings, because that's hard. It's
Yeah,
hard.
it
It's hard to
is.
do that, especially because if like your crop isn't really finished in the spring, but you need to go ahead and put your summer stuff in, or vice versa. Like we often think of fall gardening. We're gonna people think, oh, it's gonna be like September or so when I plant that, but you're really planting a lot of things right in July,
Yeah, the heat
right?
of
Or you're
summer.
starting things in July, right when a lot of our summer stuff is just in full production. So I'm always impressed when people can do that, because it does take a lot of
I've been
time
too.
and
For
commitment.
homeowners, yeah. When I see homeowners doing that, I'm always kind of impressed. I'm like, wow, they are planners, and they work their plan and plan their work, and they are really, there's an objective behind those people, I think, that do that. And they may be preserving a lot of stuff, so they want that extra production, or they may have a high capacity soil that can take that intensity of production. Whatever the case, but I've always looked and I was like, wow. Because me, I'm a kind of a 1-season gardener myself. I'll plant some things, pick some things, but I don't do, just personally now at this point in my life, I don't do a lot of succession planting, because, my wife and child, they don't eat fresh tomatoes, and I want them to, but they won't. But they do love bell peppers. So I keep them in bell peppers for as long as I can. So
I think
it goes back to objectives.
two of the things I'm hearing you all talk about. One is labor, and the other is skill,
Mm.
or abilities.
Mm.
And I think that goes with passion as well. But on the labor side, I think it's really easy to underestimate how much time and energy it's going to take to manage. And so in the world of agriculture, we generally talk about intensive and extensive systems. So intensive systems are relatively smaller footprint, and you put a ton of person and otherwise energy and focus into that to try to maximize the production from that space.
Mm-hmm.
Extensive systems tend to rely on a larger footprint as far as space, and they don't necessarily use you're not managing it as intensively. And so you think about like grazing land for pasture, you're going to have a more distributed model as opposed to like a feedlot or something like that, where you have lots of animals packed in and you're feeding a lot in that intensive space. Think about a greenhouse versus a field environment, the intensiveness. Anyway, the more intense you do it, this is how you can turn a 1-acre farm into way more work than a 300-acre farm.
Mm-hmm.
Which sounds insane, but that's the truth, is that if you're heavily mechanized and efficient at scale, and you're not as intensive at scale, you can actually end up spending more time on the more intensive thing. And then plus it's a little bit economic-y, whatever, but there's a lot of time and energy that goes into this. And it's one of those really, it crosses over into the social realm when I hear it proposed that like poor people who can't afford high quality nutritious food, or maybe food at all, should just grow their own food. Is that there's as anything other than a triage. Like, yes, all these people should have access to do that, but the growing your own food is not some trivial thing. It requires labor and time, and if you're working multiple jobs, or you have multiple kids and or multiple kids and all these other things going on in your life, the labor side of managing a highly intensive, constantly rotating, succession planted garden across the whole year is a full-time
When does
job
fun
plus.
become work? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, so you quit your job and then raise your own food that you could have bought for a fraction of the price by keeping your job. This is a tension that runs through agriculture overall. The other one I would bring up is the skill thing. So not only does it require time, but it requires skilled time to manage all that stuff, keep an eye on pests, keep an eye on when stuff's ready to harvest, when things need to be succession planted, et cetera. And as I was looking around, it is this idea there's this thing with businesses too, and other things too, called like a survivorship bias. And what that is when you have these people or businesses or whatever that make it through and succeed, what you don't see is all of the other people who tried and didn't succeed. And you start to have this sense that the people who made it through, it's doable. See, you can do it. You can easily do it. This is replicable. And the replicability of these intensive systems is a real challenge. And that's, I think, where the disheartening part comes, where it's like, I put out like a small amount compared to them and my stuff got wiped out. I must be a total moron.
Or year 3, your soil gets very tired.
Mm-hmm.
And your success rate starts to go down if you're managing like a succession type scenario with 3 crops a year. You're like, oh goodness, my soil needs to rest. And on those small spaces, if you're dealing with food production, you may need a little bit of rotational area, and diseases are going to crop up, insect pressure is going to crop up, these long-term issues that we don't always talk about. You don't always get that from a picture. I guess I'm in the business of really encouraging people. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, oh, great. You're thinking about growing something. What is success for your first year of ever growing anything? What does that look like? And let's go for that. Is it 2 peppers? Is it 1 ghost pepper plant that's going to be amazing and have a bajillion, flames on it that's going to burn you up? What does success look like? I mean, what are you going to enjoy? What's going to encourage you? And we're not talking about, I'm not talking about market gardens or commercial scale production. If it's personal food production, it's like, what do you find joy in? I mean, there's lots of reasons why you grow this. You tell me what success is, and we'll try to work with you on that.
Right. I try to talk to people about, we've already mentioned kind of like the size of things. And like you said about people being busy in the summer and everything like that. Like, are you going to be around to water? And
Yeah.
and thinking of like our own little tilled up area in our backyard. It is not that big at all. And this past weekend, my father-in-law was there and he had his tiller and he was like helping like finish tilling it. And then he was like going to keep going and like he was going to keep adding rows. And I was like, no. Like that's big enough. And he's like, oh no, you're going to need more. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to need more with 3 small children. Right. Because this time of year when you're doing that and you till it all up and it looks all nice and you plant,
Yeah.
you put your little transplants in and it's like, oh, look at that. Like I can take care of this. Well, then you get to like July or August, it's 90 degrees outside, weeds, the bugs, like everything like that. So I think it's like, you want to dream big, right? You want this big and that's awesome. And you should have that be like your ultimate goal. But if it's your first time doing it, like, the reality of what is your social life like, right? Like, are you, if you're single or whatever, are you going to be around? You plan to travel a lot? Are you going to have somebody can come water for you? All of those things to, maybe it's better if I start off with some containers or a raised bed, or I just do like a little spot. And like Ray said, I'm just doing like a few plants because maybe I have this idea in my mind that I want to grow things. It'd be wonderful. And then I do it and then I absolutely hate it. And it would be better off just to start small and, or maybe you realize, man, I'm just going to buy it from the farmer's market, or maybe my neighbors and I can go in together on, a shared thing. But I think starting off there, keep those big dreams, right? Of that huge garden or whatever you imagine, but just the reality of it, because all the things that go along with a garden, thankfully It's not like bringing, an extra cat or dog or something home, but, you have to think about those before people impulse get those. Same thing with
Yeah.
in your garden or plants, have to take care of them too.
Grooming is expensive on golden doodles. Just a word of caution, people. Everything involves, I guess. I mean, a lot of the stuff we do for objectives or whatever specific reasons, there's a cost involved. Some kind of cost. I mean, either time or monetary resources. And I guess at the end, Brett, you've talked time and again about, you used to do food production. You guys kind of took stock of why you were doing that and the opportunity cost of doing that versus something else. And now you guys are doing some really cool projects and all this cool stuff in your backyard. That's not necessarily food production, but it's still growing things because that matches your current vibe. It sounds like maybe a little bit better after taking stock.
Yeah, and we're also bougie white people in Lexington with some money, and so we pay other people to grow our food who are really passionate
Yeah.
about it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a nice thing that we don't have any kids, so
That's a win too.
yeah,
That
yeah,
it makes you appreciate if you've ever tried to grow a garden. You may still be growing a garden, or you may not. But I find that people that no longer, grow a lot of their own food, if they've ever grown their food, they really have an appreciation for
Mm-hmm.
producers that grow food because they're like, I know how much work it is to keep the, corn earworms out of this sweet corn, or I know these potatoes didn't grow themselves or whatever. So there's
yeah.
value in that too.
I think you all have put your finger on why this irks me kind of when I see this stuff. It's not for the people who are doing the thing. Like, do your thing, go off. I'm a strange person. You're a strange person. We're doing
Be weird.
really
Grow ghost
odd.
peppers.
That's right. But I think what bothers me is the influence that social media has on so many spheres of our life, and I see this as like the example in this space of that. But it's the same as, hey, young mom, I know you can have abs again 12 weeks postpartum if you follow my plan, or you can lose, that kind of thing, or like,
Yeah, if you want to die.
use my work, financial plan to become a millionaire by 4th of July, or like those types of vibes that get put out where it's not so much like an inspiration that you can use to inform your vision. It's more like this unrealistic expectation. So inspiration versus expectation that gets created in people's minds. I think it also creates a class of people who are hyper skeptical of stuff that we say from extension or say from experience about, like, well, the person on Facebook said that they grow, dense apple tree plantings and they never spray anything, and they grow in wherever. I mean, it just creates these like strange, unrealistic expectations that land really in really painful ways in real life. That either you lose the trees because they get wiped out by fire blight or whatever, and now you have to square that in your mind, or you think you're a failure because you didn't live up to the expectations of that thing. I think it's almost just this weird offshoot of social media expectations that I don't like. I don't like the way that it makes me feel. I don't like the way that it makes other people feel. And again, maybe I'm projecting, but. And to your point earlier, Ray, about like how difficult it actually is, it also kind of sometimes implies that growing food is really easy. And I find that to be kind of insulting to people who are doing that and really facing these major challenges that are associated with growing stuff. And so that's maybe a part of it too, is that it's anytime that there's a really challenging problem and people are like, there's an easy solution. And like, if you're an idiot, if you're not doing it, look at this. So maybe I'm just working. Maybe this is like a therapy session on the back end of our horticulture.
It's just not super straightforward. And once again, I'm careful to make assumptions if people want to get started doing whatever. You want to drill down and find out, first of all, why they're kind of doing it. And then find out what the resources they have to make that happen. They may be sitting on top of a rock slab and like, wow, that's going to take a lot of, raised beds or whatever, and it's going to take XYZ costs to make that happen. In years past when we were on the farm, we had, like Jessica said, we had we had kind of garden truck garden crops that we sold, and that was a different sort of thing. We grew based on what was productive and what would sell. And then we had a significant planting for 4 children and 2 adults, mom and dad. That's 6 people, and we relied on that through the winter time. And that was really that was kind of predates social media. That was back in the days of dial-up phone, people. It's been a while, but we really were dependent on that. And that was a different sort of thing because mom knew what we would eat. She knew what she could can. She canned a tremendous amount of things like corn and cucumbers that were highly productive and had some nutrition, like the sweet corn had, carbs and things in there. And, we usually raised our own hogs, and we did have cattle, but they were too expensive. We would sell those when hamburger was cheap then and buy those back because we had registered Angus. There's all these metrics that went into food production. It's because that was our main source of food in the wintertime. It really reduced our grocery bills. So that felt so different, and we did as little as we could to bring in a good crop for our own personal food production, aside from the truck route stuff that we grew. But, everything was measured in terms of, getting the most bang for your buck. And that was our objective then, which is significantly different from someone that just wants a beautiful backyard patio. It may be, landscape plants, or maybe edible plants, whatever the case is. You just have to know what people's objectives and resources are to get this done. But like you said, no expectations, no judgment. And it's not that other people are putting that on you. Sometimes we put it on ourselves.
Yeah.
We really do. We really do.
It's so easy to look at some media landscapes and feel less than or feel inadequate.
The other thing to keep in mind is you're not seeing the whole picture, right? You're only seeing what they're choosing to show you. So I can take a great picture of these tomatoes and wow, look at how beautiful these tomatoes look and everything. But who knows, right behind that, there might be Johnson grass surrounding all of them, right? So keep that in mind. Like when we see those pristine gardens or see pristine things that, it might not all be, they're choosing just to show you as with all social media, right? When my quote is always like social media lies, that, that, we're only choosing to show like the best happy things. A lot of times people are not showing all of the other struggles that they're dealing with in their gardens. So yeah, don't compare yourself to what you see on there, and give it a go and try.
And that's a worse effect.
And it's okay if it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah. Those that have grown know that, they just automatically, their mind just accounts for the fact that they know that, that's just a point of pride. Somebody's taking a picture of a beautiful, bell pepper plant. That's perfect. But it's the ones that may have less experience. It can set a level of expectation that kind of gets wonky, can be a little wonky. So be cautious of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that what I want to be a part of is providing information that helps people to have reasonable expectations, and then help them or support them as they develop their own vision and values for what they're trying to do, and then help them get there.
Yeah,
and that this disrupts that cycle a little bit because it produces expectations before, and it. But I think that's kind of a lot of the reason why any of us want to do this is we want people to be the best version of the person or what situation that they want to be. It's not, we have a vision for you and here it is, now take it and go. It's something a little more reflexive and slower, unfortunately, than social media clicking through. And so Old Man Shakes Fist at Cloud on podcast for almost an hour here. Yeah, so I really appreciate y'all jumping in and, talking this through because I think that I have actually a better understanding of how I feel about it now. If you all have thoughts out there in listener land about this and how we're wrong and urban agriculture is the future, and we would love to hear that. We're not unreasonable people. We love to hear some different opinions about this. But if you'd like to do that, you can go over to our Instagram at hortculturepodcast. You can also email us at hortculturepodcast@gmail.com to get in contact with us about future episodes, this episode. If you think, you got a good guest that you'd like to be on or something like that, feel free to do that. And with that, I'll just say I will see you on down the road.